The war room of the Varn Dominion floated high above the surface of Corvallis, its massive black dome visible from orbit. Inside, 13 of the most powerful minds in the galaxy stood in silence, staring at the war table. It glowed with the holographic projections of fleet positions, supply lines, and planetary weaknesses, yet no one looked at the enemy formations. Their eyes, one by one, shifted to a single thing: the old chair near the far end of the chamber. It wasn't broken. It wasn't decorated. It was just empty, as always, covered in dust, never moved, never used. A symbol, a warning, reminder. Commander Yalvin, the youngest officer in the room, frowned and leaned toward his superior. "Why do we still leave that chair? Isn't it time to replace it?" Admiral Jurith stiffened. The room turned colder, despite the atmospheric control. "Systems." No one answered immediately. Jurith finally muttered, "That chair is reserved. You don't ask why. You simply don't sit there." But Yalvin wasn't done. He gestured at the war table. "We're preparing to burn an entire rebel system to dust. We command over 400 dreadnoughts. We have technology older than some stars, and we're leaving a chair. For a species no one's seen in 70 years? The silence deepened. Eyes fell to the floor. Yalvin saw confusion on some faces, discomfort on others. He felt the weight of something unspoken pressing against his chest. "Earth," someone finally whispered. Just the name. The word itself felt like it echoed across the black stone walls. Yalvin shook his head. "That's just a myth. They're a primitive third planet of a dying yellow star." They didn't even have faster-than-light travel until late. What could they possibly have done to make the entire galaxy reserve a chair? Admiral Jurith slowly walked toward a locked data panel on the wall. He placed his hand on it. A deep red light scanned him. The wall shifted, revealing an old file drive. Physical, unconnected, secure. He handed it to Yalvin. "You wanna?" "No." "Then watch this alone, and when you're done, you'll understand why that chair stays empty." Yalvin took it without a word. And when the meeting ended, he slipped away to his quarters, inserted the drive, and sat down. The screen flickered. The recording began. It was dated 70 years ago. The footage showed the original Galactic Council, the leaders of 13. Major empires gathered in a massive star chamber. It was formal, imposing. Every being there radiated arrogance and certainty. They had sent a message across the stars, demanding Earth's surrender or alliance, depending on how it was interpreted. Everyone expected silence, or groveling. But Earth replied with one word: acknowledged. And then they arrived. Not a fleet. A single human. No name given. No weapons. No weapons. No translator tech. He spoke every language fluently. He walked into the council chamber alone and placed a simple briefcase on the table. Then he waited. The recording had no audio, but Yalvin saw the stillness in the room, the shifting postures, the cautious glances. The human opened the case. And what came next? Wasn't a bomb? Wasn't a virus? It was a projection, a sequence of images. First, Earth's wars, the worst of them. Atomic fire, skies burning, cities turned to bones. Then footage of humans smiling after, rebuilding, laughing, dancing, as if destruction was just part of the cycle. Then Earth's final war, one that wasn't recorded in galactic archives. A war so thorough, so absolute, that the enemy species ceased to exist entirely, not just physically, but culturally. No stories, no names, no remains, erased, forgotten, not in rage, but in cold, calculated action. It's a war waged not to win, but to end the very idea of future retaliation. Yalvin watched, breath frozen in his throat. The camera panned to the alien. Leaders. Their faces were pale, scales dulled, spines flattened. One even appeared to faint. The human said something. Just a sentence. There was no translation, no transcript. But whatever he said, it ended the War Council. He closed the case, stood, and walked out. No. Guards stopped him. No questions were asked. The footage ended. Yalvin sat there in silence for a long time. He didn't know how long. He felt changed, like some old truth had been dragged into the light. Earth hadn't fought for power. They hadn't begged for peace. They had simply arrived, spoken, and left. And the galaxy, once filled with empires that tore each other apart for minor insults, had collectively agreed on one unspoken law: never call. Earth again. That law was never written down. It didn't need to be, because those who saw that moment knew if Earth ever came back, it meant someone had forced their hand. And that would mean the end of more than just wars. It would mean the end of certainty. The end of control. Yalvin stood. He walked back to the war room, past the guards, past the whispers, and stared at the empty chair. He didn't ask any more questions. He just looked at it with quiet respect. The other officers didn't speak, but they nodded slightly. They knew. He finally understood, and somewhere far away in a quiet solar system orbiting a yellow star, Earth listened in silence. They had never left. They had simply waited, and their chair on every council, every chamber, remained untouched. Not out of fear, not out of reverence, but because everyone in the galaxy knew if Earth ever took that seat again, the war was already over. The stars above Corvallis blinked steadily, ancient and distant, unbothered by the affairs of war and fear. But deep beneath the planetary surface, in the classified vaults of the Varn Dominion's central archive tower, alarms had begun to light, not from an attack, not from a weapons breach, but from something far more dangerous: a transmission, one that had not been touched in 70 years, one that was never meant to be opened again. Yalvin stood alone in Archive Chamber E9, the cold glow of the consoles flickering across his face. He had not slept since viewing the Earth's file. He hadn't spoken a word to anyone. He simply requested Level 9 clearance and waited for the system to unlock. Number 1 tried to stop him. Perhaps they knew it was already too late. The file in front of him blinked with a simple title: EARTH Final Transmission. Do not RSPOND his. Hand hovered over the console. Part of him screamed to walk away. But something deeper pulled him. Forward, the same instinct that led explorers into dark caves, that drove primitive beings to touch fire. He tapped the screen. The vault shook, not violently. Not like an earthquake, but subtly. Like reality had taken a breath. The transmission didn't play video. It didn't show any human face. It was just a pulse. A single data burst, encrypted. With code Earth had never shared. Not with allies, not with spies, not even with Aziz. This wasn't a message, it was a key. And the second it activated, every defense system in the Varn Dominion's network paused. Lights flickered. Holograms glitched. Satellites blinked off for half a second, and then the screen went. Black dot, one word appeared. Acknowledged. Yalvin staggered back. "That's not possible," he whispered. It was just a Phylan old log, but now the room was changing. Lights dimmed, then brightened. Consoles scrolled through strange code. A new signal appeared, this one faint, like a heartbeat. In the distance, it wasn't coming from Earth. It was coming toward Earth. Yalvin ran up through the archive tower, to the command complex, past guards and officers shouting his name. When he burst into the main war room, the high command had already gathered. The table was glowing red. Admiral Jurith didn't look surprised, only tired. "You opened the file," he said quietly. Yalvin nodded. It responded. Earth responded. "That's Jurith." Pointed at the projection. A new ship had entered. Varn-controlled space, just one. Small, old dash, fashioned, unarmed. No shields. No escorts. No weapons systems detectable. It moved like a drifting comet, slow. Steady, absolutely unconcerned with the massive defense grid locking onto it. Yalvin stared at the readings. "Why aren't we firing?" Jurith's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because we know what happens when Earth sends a ship. But there's no fleet, no backup. They didn't even announce themselves." "That is the announcement," Jurith replied. "You broke silence," they heard. "Now they've come." The chair at the end of the table, the one always left, empty, seemed somehow heavier, as if it knew. The war room watched as the ship approached orbit. It didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't slow. It simply hovered, and then broadcast a signal. No audio. No threat. Just a set of coordinates. Not planetary coordinates. Systemic ones. It was marking worlds. 17 of them. Every system involved in the rebellion. Every fleet command center. Every hidden base. Yalvin blinked. Those aren't our known intel targets. They're better than our known intel, Jurith whispered. One of the science officers looked up in shock. This is decades ahead of our scans. How could they know this? They always knew, Jurith said. They just never cared. Until now. Yalvin's voice trembled. Then what do we do? The room fell into silence. Finally, the admiral stepped toward the war table. He deactivated the attack orders. The fleet pulled back. The invasion of the rebel systems was aborted, not out of fear, but out of caution. Then Jurith looked around. The table. If Earth speaks again, he said softly, we listen. We obey, or we vanish. But what do they want? Someone asked. Jurith shook his head. Nothing. Earth never wanted control. They only act when someone forces them to. And far above the planet, the lone Earth ship pulsed once more. Not threatening, not warm, just present. Watching, waiting, and in war rooms across the galaxy from the insectoid dynasties of Hive 96 to the crystalline monarchies of Relux Prime Generals. Notice the signal. Each of them turned, slowly, to the empty chair in their own war chambers, and for the first time in 70 years, they began to wonder, is Earth back? In the beginning, they thought Earth's power came from its weapons. That was the assumption, easy, simple, logical. When the Galactic Council watched the destruction Earth had once unleashed on the unnamed invaders, they saw the fire first. Cities vaporized from orbit. Suns collapsed through artificial ignition. Moons shattered and converted into metallic dust swarms that chewed through ships like insects. The galaxy saw these things and whispered, humanity must be feared for its machines. But they were wrong. It wasn't the bombs, it wasn't the fleets. It was something far older, something colder, something every species had once known and then forgotten. Now, as Yalvin reviewed the final declassified sections of Earth's transmission logs, he realized why the Council had gone quiet. Why every commander, tyrant, and sovereign across the stars had simply decided to never ask Earth for anything again. Because Earth had reminded them of something the galaxy feared more than annihilation. Determination without hesitation. The briefcase. The human carried into the Council wasn't a threat device. It was a mirror. A reflection of what happens when a species refuses to break. Earth's real weapon was simple, terrible, unstoppable. They would choose victory. Even if it meant destroying themselves in the process. The rest of the Council empires relied on reason. They calculated risk, avoided mutual destruction. Even the cruelest powers, like the Khazar Swarm or the Cold Kings of Aln-6, played long games measured conquest. Earth dead, Earth fought like there was nothing left to lose, and the galaxy had no defense against that. In one archived file, a war historian from Velos 3 analyzed Earth's past conflicts. She concluded, trembling, that humans had mastered not just the science of war, but the philosophy of obliteration. They didn't just win battles. They ended the concept of resistance. In the footage, Yalvin saw one such instance. A colony under siege by alien invaders, powerful, technologically superior. Earth didn't negotiate. Earth didn't offer a counterstrike. Instead, they unleashed Protocol 010 Future. The weapon wasn't a missile or virus. It was silence. Targeted blackout of all communication across enemy systems. Then, a wave of false data, convincing the enemy that Earth had already destroyed them, and finally dashed nothing. No retaliation, no broadcasts, just stillness. And in that silence, panic grew. The enemy began to collapse from within. They turned on themselves. Their empires built on control couldn't handle confusion by the time Earth finally attacked. There was no army left to fight. The Council didn't understand it then. They had protocols, chains of command, philosophies of war and surrender. Earth ignored all of it. And that was their weapon. Not rage, not power, resolve. Back in the present, the single Earth vessel continued to hover in Varn's space. Still unarmed, still unmoving, but its signal repeated, like a quiet drumbeat in the minds of every strategist. Coordinates a pattern. 17 points. One by one, rebel worlds began to shut down their transmissions. Some abandoned their posts. Others broadcast apologies, not to the Varn Dominion. 2. Earth. Ships that had once engaged in skirmishes simply turned and fled, some into deep space, others into unknown systems. The rebels didn't fear the Varn. They feared what the arrival of Earth might mean. Yalvan, watching all this unfold, approached the Admiral again. "I've studied every file, every battle, every protocol. It's not technology, is it?" he said. Jurith turned slowly. "No, it never was. Then why did we wait so long to tell the galaxy?" The Admiral's eyes were heavy, because the galaxy already knew. "That's why we leave the chair. That's why we never speak their name at meetings. Because Earth is not an ally, or an enemy, or a threat. Earth is the reminder of what we once were, and what we fear we might become again." Yalvin stared at the glowing war table. The Earth ship was still there, still silent, still watching. The Dominion fleet hadn't moved. The rebels had gone quiet, and across dozens of war rooms. Commanders hesitated, because the signal didn't ask for anything. There was no demand. Just the pulse, the same word again, acknowledged, and they all understood what it meant now. Earth wasn't responding to a threat. They weren't even angry. They had simply been activated, which meant someone had violated the unspoken law of the galaxy. Don't wake the humans, because if you do, they don't bring warnings, they bring endings. The Galactic Council had never expected Earth to respond, certainly not the way it did 70 years ago. Now the galaxy stood divided but proud. 13 mighty empires controlled every corner of known space, from the frost rings of Harka Prime to the bioluminescent fields of Velos 3. Wars were frequent, peace was rare, but power was everything. And Earth was a speck. A curious, chaotic planet barely crawling into space, its people loud, unpredictable, and entirely unimpressive to most of the galaxy's ancient races. But protocol required all developing species to be invited into the council once they achieved faster-than-light capability. An empty gesture, really. An offer of submission dressed as welcome. No one ever said no. Most bent the knee quickly. Some tried to resist and were erased. But Earth did something no one had prepared for. They accepted, and then they showed up. No ships darkening the skies, no armada to impress or threaten. It's just one single vessel, old and patched, gliding silently through council-controlled space. It didn't even travel in a protected convoy. No escorts, no fleet. Just a signal, one representative. Docking as instructed. Thank you for the invitation. In the Grand Council chamber, located in the orbiting citadel of Geranine, the high leaders of the 13 empires gathered to witness this primitive species arrive. Holograms flared, translators buzzed. Security teams stood ready with full anti-biological defenses. No one trusted the humans. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were strange, too emotional, too chaotic, too unreadable. When the Earth ship docked, silence was complete. The hatch opened. Out stepped a single man. No armor, no entourage, just a dark suit, a short beard, and a silver briefcase. He walked slowly, confidently, with eyes that scanned the chamber without fear, without even awe. The kind of gaze that didn't ask permission, but expected the room to listen. The guards stood down, even the strongest empaths among. The Gloon delegates found their mental scans bouncing off like dust against glass. There was a stillness around the humana, controlled pressure, like a coiled spring that had no intention of moving, lest it had to. He didn't introduce himself with a name, didn't recite his planet's achievements or ask for help. He simply placed the briefcase on the long obsidian table and said, in clean, accentless galactic common, "We received your message. Earth is not interested in subservience, alliance, or conflict. We are here only to ensure clarity." Then he opened the case. Inside was not a weapon, not a gift. It was a device, compact, matte black. No symbols. He pressed one button. The chamber dimmed. A hologram rose above the table, and the images began to play. Scenes of war. Earth's own history stretched across thousands of years. Empires rising and falling.
Ice.
Cities turned to ash. Weapons of fire, of sound, of invisible death. But the footage didn't stop at destruction. It moved on to something. Stranger resilience. Rebuilding, survival after horror. Humanity had burned itself again and again, but each time it crawled back stronger. And then the final war. Galaxy had never known. A war not fought in defense, nor in conquest, but in extinction. A hostile species from deep space had tried to annihilate Earth, believing it weak. Earth responded not with a counterattack, but with total erasure. Not just of soldiers, not just of planets. They erased the enemy's name, their culture, their signals, their memory from every system. The species had not only died, they had been forgotten. The footage ended. The council chamber was silent, frozen. Even the air felt heavier, and the human, now closing the briefcase, spoke again. "We are not conquerors. We do not seek rule. We only respond when provoked. This is not a warning. It is a record." He stood, eyes steady. "Invite Earth again, and you will not get a message. We'll get a result." Then he walked out. No one stopped him. No one spoke. He left the chamber, the station, in council-controlled space without a word more. And from that day on, quiet rule. Spread unspoken, but understood. Never summon Earth. The next time you see them, it will be too late. And back in the present, Yalvin sat in silence as he watched the old footage again. The glow of the hologram dancing on his face, he understood. Now, not just the fear, not just the respect, but the reason the galaxy had left a single chair empty in every war room. It wasn't for diplomacy. It wasn't out of caution. It was a reminder that Earth, when it came, didn't bring allies or demands. Earth brought truth, and once that truth arrived, it could not be unseen. For the first time in galactic memory, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The Earth ship, small, unarmed, nameless, hovered in orbit above the Varn Dominion's command world without moving, without transmitting, without responding. No hails, no scans, no visible activity. It had sent its signal, delivered its list of rebel worlds, and then gone utterly still, as if Earth had spoken, and was now waiting. 1 hour passed, an hour in which no ship dared move, an hour in which no command was given. Across the Varn Dominion, battlecruisers that had once threatened entire star clusters powered down their weapons. Admiral Jurith canceled all fleet deployments. Ground troops were ordered to stand down. Surveillance drones were recalled. On enemy systems, rebel commanders began erasing communications, burning data cores, and abandoning strongholds without orders or explanation. The war that had raged for 5 standard years began to wither not from force, but from silence. Yalvin stood at the center of the Varn war room, staring at the red dot that marked the human vessel on the tactical table. It hadn't moved. Hadn't cloaked. It didn't need to. It's not doing anything, he whispered. It already did, Jurith replied, voice quiet and tight. It showed up, but what do we do now? The Admiral stared at the glowing screen for a long time, then he said, "We wait." The room, normally filled with orders, shouting, and command codes, had gone so still that Yalvin could hear the faint hum of the air vents. Officers who once boasted about planetary sieges now sat motionless, eyes on the unchanging dot in orbit, and across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in the Hive 96 cluster. The Swarm Mother paused her expansion campaign for the first time in 300 years. On the glass towers of Relux Prime, Crystalline Kings voted unanimously to halt their weapons research and begin open negotiations with former enemies. In the secret vaults of the trade lords of Draxil, entire libraries of stolen Earth data were purged within minutes, because they all knew that ship in Varn space wasn't just watching them, it was reminding them of what came after silence. At 59 minutes and 47 seconds, the Earth ship blinked once. A simple pulse. No translation. Just a mist. 12 seconds later, the ship vanished. No flash, no warp signature, no energy burst. It didn't jump to hyperspace. It just stopped existing. The Varn orbital sensor scrambled to recalculate. Scanner rays blinked in confusion. Eyes returned errors. It was as if the ship had never been there at all, and yet every being who had seen it knew the truth. It had come, and now it had left, but not before delivering its message. The rebels understood first. They stopped fighting, not because destroyed them, but because they knew. Earth had seen them. That was enough. That was worse than destruction. Admiral Jureth stood before the War Council later that night, his voice calm and clear. There will be no retaliation, no further attacks. The war is over. Some objected. Some whispered of pride, of power, of vengeance. Jureth simply said, "Would you rather face Earth again?" The room went silent. Even the most arrogant commanders nodded and said nothing more. Yalvin stood alone later that night. Beneath the open sky of Corvallis, stars above were clear, undisturbed, beautiful. He thought about the ship, about the silence, and about the chair, the war room, the one still empty, still untouched, still waiting. He now understood why it was never moved, why every empire had copied the tradition. It wasn't about honoring Earth. It wasn't even about fearing them. It was a precaution, because the one time Earth came. They didn't destroy cities. They didn't make demands. They simply paused the galaxy for 1 hour. And in that hour, the galaxy changed. One empty chair, one signal, 1 hour. That was all it took, because Earth didn't speak loudly. They never had to. They spoke with absence. And absence, when it came from Earth, was louder than any war. It started, as most great mistakes do, with arrogance. Just 5 standard months after the Earth vessel vanished from Varn space, silence had begun to wear thin across the galaxy. The rebels were gone, their systems abandoned or stripped to the stone, trade routes reopened. Old enemies made shaky alliances. The council reconvened in whispers. The galaxy, for all its fear, was healing. And then came the Ashith Accord, a rising power from the outer spiral rim. The Ashith had not been present during Earth's brief return. Their empire had grown in isolation, quietly, dangerously, fueled by the myths of humanity, but untouched by the memory. They had heard stories, yes, of the empty chair, of the unarmed ship, of the war that died without a fight. But to them it sounded like weakness, like bluff, and they were tired of fear ruling the stars. Their new leader, Farushtal, a warborn strategist bred in zero gravity and armed with artificial instincts, declared during his rise to power, "We are not bound by ghost legends. We are the next rulers of the galaxy. Earth is just another story told by cowards." Within weeks, the Ashith began their campaign. It wasn't slow. It wasn't quiet. They swept through 2 minor empires, vaporized a border station near Hive 96, and severed the communications of 4 council-linked worlds. Their ships were fast, brutal, efficient, but their mistake wasn't the conquest. It was the message, broadcast across the stars in every known language. "We offer no seat to Earth. We will not leave chairs for shadows." And just like that, they had done the one thing the rest of the galaxy had carefully avoided for 70 years. They called Earth out. On Varn, Council reconvened in emergency. Admiral Jureth sat at the war table, his hands folded tight, eyes fixed on the now. Empty. Screen. No Earth signal. No response. The chair at the end of the table remained untouched. Yalvin, now promoted, and standing beside his mentor, whispered, "Do you think Earth will come?" Jureth didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Not yet. Why not? Because Earth doesn't come when provoked. They come when the pattern breaks. The room went quiet. The pattern. That was the word Earth had used once before, long ago. The pattern of destruction. The pattern of weakness disguised as strength. The pattern of tyrants repeating history. Earth didn't respond to threats. They responded to cycles. 3 weeks later, Sheth fleets approached the Delari Nebula sacred site, neutral space. It's untouched since before the Council was formed. There, they found a single ship. Not Earth. A probe, drifting, ancient human in origin. But it bore a symbol none of them recognized, a white circle with a thin black slash through its center. No words, no signal. The Asheth scanned it, probed it, pulled it aboard. Their engineers opened it. Inside was a sphere, cold, smooth, pulsing once every 12 seconds. They laughed. Then they scanned the pulse and understood nothing. It wasn't language. It wasn't code. It wasn't a weapon. It was time. Back on Varn, the Council sensors lit up, one by one. Systems reported gravitational anomalies, faint ones, like whispers through spational. Then came the Shadow's massive sensor blurs in deep space. Ships, not storms. Just presence, moving with purpose. Invisible to eyes, but not to instincts. And then the stars began to vanish. Not explode, not collapse, just fade-like. Something had passed between them and the galaxy, like something was coming. Jurith stood again in the war room, his voice low. They're back. Yalvin looked at the screen, but where's the signal? There won't be one, Jurith said. They don't send warnings twice. On the Asheth homeworld, Vurish Tal stood atop his obsidian tower, surrounded by his war council. There, greatest weapons, sun lances, mind voiders, mass decayers, were pointed skyward. Let them come, he growled. We are not afraid of ghosts. And then above them, space, cracked. Not visually, not physically. Something older, darker, feeling like the stars themselves had taken a step back. Every ship in orbit powered down simultaneously. Every weapon turned cold. And then the message came. Not through data streams. Not through broadcasts. It came inside the minds of every living Asheth, acknowledged. That was all. One word, and every Asheth knew in that instant. They had made a mistake, because Earth wasn't a myth. Earth wasn't a ghost. Earth was a mirror, and now it had turned to face them. In the Varn war room, the Council did not cheer. They did not gloat. They simply waited, and for the first time in weeks, Jurith walked slowly to the empty chair at the end. Of the table, he didn't sit. He didn't touch it. He placed one hand gently on the backrest and whispered, "It's yours again," because the new war had risen, and now Earth was coming too. End it. Not with noise, not with fire, but with that one thing no empire could ever understand: purpose without mercy. The signal didn't come from the throne tower. It didn't come from a sheath high command. It came from deep beneath the crust of Varashtal's one sprout homeworld inside, an old planetary relay hub that had been abandoned for centuries. Someone down there, buried in the dark, managed to reach the surface come grid just long enough to transmit 8 words. They are not killing us. They are erasing. The transmission cut. Across the galaxy, those 8 words echoed louder than any weapon. Empires that had once mocked Earth now shivered in silence. Council war rooms didn't issue orders. They held their breath. Entire fleets stayed in orbit, unmoving. They knew now this was no war. This was cleansing. The Asheth, proud and sharp, had believed they were fire, but Earth did not burn. Earth unmade in less than 3 days. 9 Asheth strongholds went completely dark. Not bombed, not invaded, simply gone. Every sensor sweep returned static. No energy, no matter, no gravity distortion. It was as if the systems had been rewritten, like deleting a sentence from reality. One by one, click, gone, gone, on the 4th day. The Council intercepted another broadcast, this one from an Asheth, destroyer adrift near the Halari dust fields. A young commander, voice trembling. They never boarded. Our defense grid saw nothing. We lost time. All of us. One moment we were here, then I was the only one. I don't remember screaming, but my throat is raw. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Tell him we surrender. Tell Earth we. The signal shattered. Mid-dash word. The destroyer was found hours later, intact. Hull unbroken. Systems operational, but empty completely. No crew. No AI. No signs of life at all. Like a theater waiting for actors who would never come, the Asheth Empire began to collapse. From within, leaders fled. Fleets turned on themselves. Codes were rewritten in desperation, trying to block what could not be seen. Some begged, some cursed, some simply vanished mid-transmission. But Earth never replied, not once, not even to acknowledge surrender, because Earth didn't accept surrender. They accepted patterns, and the Asheth had broken it. Back on Varn, Yalvin stood alone before the council table. The war room was quiet. The screen showed nothing but an empty starfield, where Asheth command once stood. Jurith approached slowly. How many systems? Alvin answered without turning. 14, no debris, no echo signatures. Just ... silence. And Earth. Gone. No signature. Not even a whisper. Jurith nodded once. They finished then. Yalvin's voice cracked slightly. But why won't they answer? Not even a signal? Jurith sighed, because we asked the wrong question. He tapped the war table. The empty chair glowed faintly. We keep wondering when Earth will strike, when they'll respond, when they'll come. But Earth doesn't come. Earth simply arrives. And when they leave? Alvin asked. Jurith looked at the stars. We're lucky they ever came at all, in the distant voids, where sensors fail and light takes centuries to move. Something stirred. Not a ship. Not a voice. A presence, moving slowly. Not with engines, but with intention, following not targets but behavior. Because Earth didn't act out of revenge. Earth wasn't angry. Earth watched, listened, and waited for the moment someone crossed the line. Again, the galaxy understood now. The empty chair was not a throne, it was a gravesite, and every war room left it untouched. Not to honor, but to remind themselves that the last sound an empire hears before vanishing is its own voice, begging into the dark and receiving nothing in return. The war was over, not officially, not by treaty, not by declaration. It simply stopped. The Asheth Accord was no more. Their worlds were gone, their names erased from council records. Monuments turned to blank stone, their symbols scrubbed. From trade routes and archives, not by force but by something far more absolute, absence and Earth. Earth did not take credit. Earth did not leave a message. Earth did not even remain. They had come, silenced an empire, and vanished again without a flag, without demand, without explanation. But their chair stayed in every council war room across the galaxy, the same strange ritual repeated. One chair, untouched. At the head of the table, or the farthest corner, depending on the species. Sometimes made of stone, sometimes metal, sometimes it wasn't even a chair, just a marked space, left unoccupied like a phantom was expected. To arrive any minute, no one sat there. No one ever would, because no one knew what Earth wanted. Only that, when they showed up, the galaxy trembled. And when they disappeared, the galaxy held its breath. On the moon station of Orisve, a council historian named Delrune Voss began recording what would become the first official archive of the Earth's intervention. He had never seen a human, had only heard the story of the single man with the silver briefcase, and watched the recordings of the Asheth collapses. His first line was simple. They never asked for power. They never asked for obedience. Earth asked for nothing because they already had everything that mattered. Resolve. In his book, Delrin proposed a theory that Earth had not evolved like other species, that their strength wasn't in their science or warfare, but in their decision to walk away from the cycle of galactic arrogance. Every empire rises, believing it is different. Earth never believed that. Earth accepted what they weren't, what they could become if they weren't careful. That's why they are feared. It's not for what they do, but for what they know. Years. Past skirmishes erupted on the edge of charted space. A pirate alliance threatened the outer moons of Syrinx. A power-hungry heir tried to restart the Cold King's dynasty. But always, before the final blow, someone would pause and ask, "We heard from Earth." And that was enough. Wars were halted by silence, because silence meant Earth might be listening, and no one wanted to be the next to fill the empty chair. Yalvin, now older, stood once again in the Varn war room. It looked nearly identical to how it had a decade earlier. Same table, same screens, same worn maps and flickering stars. Only now, Jurith was gone. The Admiral had retired peacefully, left a note that simply said, "Don't move the chair." Yalvin had kept his promise. He stared at it now. Plain. Simple. A steel frame with a matte black seat. It had no special markings. It didn't glow. It didn't hum. The room respected it. Sometimes new officers asked, "What if Earth never comes back?" Yalvin always gave the same answer. Then we were lucky they came at all, because Earth had not returned. Not in ships, not in signals, not in warnings. The chair stayed empty, and that, perhaps, was Earth's greatest message. They didn't need to be seen. They didn't need to be feared. The galaxy had learned that true power didn't shout. It whispered once, and let memory do the rest. In a far corner of uncharted space, a small probe drifted. It bore no weapon, no engine, no message. Just a single white circle, and a line through its center waiting, watching. Not to destroy, not to command, but to remember. And the galaxy, in its pride and hunger and confusion, would go on building fleets, making alliances, rising and falling. But one chair in every chamber would stay empty, just in case. Because Earth was not a ruler. Earth was not a god. Earth was the end of questions, and sometimes that was all it took. The chair stays empty, forever.